Welcome to Formosa Dream Chasers
We're your hosts, Mary Ann.
and Ching
Please join us as we explore the journeys amazing people take in pursuit of their dreams.
and get insights from their experiences
Let's hit the road.
and get started.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Formosa Dream Chasers with me, your host, Mary Ann Shoko. Longtime listeners of the show know that our show centers on real stories of people building meaningful lives and pursuing purpose, whether in Taiwan or elsewhere. Today, we have a returning guest, a good friend of mine, Michelle Capistrano. In an earlier episode, Michelle shared her experiences growing up in the Philippines and the beginning of her health journey, which began with a pre-existing health condition of having asthma. Living with asthma affected her on a regular basis, which I myself saw as her friend when we were still studying at university. Her journey then started to evolve when she started working in the pharmaceutical industry. She started out with GlaxoSmithKline and is now a medical sales manager in a pharmaceutical company in Singapore. Today, at 47, Michelle found herself noticing a gap in discussions about health. There weren't many conversations, particularly for Asian women over 40, navigating midlife and in the areas of health and lifestyle. And instead of waiting for that space to exist, she decided to create it herself. And that's part of the reason why she's here today. In today's episode, we'll talk about her personal journey, what led her to start speaking out, and how redefining your life after 40 can actually be the beginning of something new. Michelle, hello and welcome back to the show.
Marianne, it's nice to be back. Thank you for having me again.
No, thank you for joining me and, having this really personal chat as we talk about your health journey and what you're starting. But before we dive into your new endeavor, can we take a moment to go back and look at how your health journey started? I know that it began with you having asthma. So, for listeners who don't know what that condition is, can you explain a little bit what kind of disease that is and what triggers it and how it affected your day-to-day living?
Okay, so maybe to keep it simple, asthma is it's a disease that if experienced or if you have it, it's normally passed on through your genes, so it's genetically connected. So in my case, my mom had it and my dad had it also. So definitely one of us, their kids would have it. And unfortunately, I have the gene. So when I experienced it, I was just 2 years old the first time I had it. And then the symptoms would be like wheezing, coughing. Sometimes you would have infection of the lungs called bronchitis. And you will also have difficulty breathing. In some cases, the lungs just totally close up, and this is caused by inflammation. And the inflammation is triggered by a lot of things. In my case, what triggers inflammation in my lungs are my allergens. And when I was younger, my mom discovered through some health checkups that they put me through that I'm allergic to chocolate and crustaceans. But when I got older, I think back in 2016, I did another test. And of course, the technology is going to be very different now compared to in the 80s. So now they have more allergens. I mean, you can get tested for more different types of allergens, much more now compared to in the 80s. And I discovered that I'm also allergic to dairy. So that was for me the game changer because I didn't know that I was allergic to dairy since I was a kid. So I've always had at least one serving of dairy every year. And my allergic rhinitis in the morning never went away. But since 2016, I removed it from my diet. And if I do take it, I have to take some type of antihistamine to counteract the negative response that my body would have after ingesting this type of allergen. My health has improved so much more compared to when I was in my teens. And then I live now a relatively normal life compared to when I was younger. Yeah. So I really had a lot of inflammation back then because of unknown allergens, and because of how I discovered my new allergens and how I manage my health now, then I would say I hardly have any attacks. Maybe in a year I'll probably have one, and if I do have one, it's very mild. I still need to take sick leave from work, but I don't need to go to the hospital for it anymore. Unlike before, where I had to visit hospitals like once every quarter, which is very expensive. But, as an adult, you really learn how to take care of yourself and you find ways to cope with the illness. So I'm just lucky that I'm able to manage it now much better.
So when you have an asthma attack, because I think there are different type of asthmas as well. I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's also like skin asthma.
Yes, I also had that because inflammation is inflammation. So if say you are exposed to a trigger, then your body will start to get inflamed, right? So it can come out in different organs. In my case, comes out in the lungs, and sometimes the inflammation would manifest in your skin also. So if my body can handle the allergen, maybe because it's not a lot, or maybe my immune system, which was much better at that time when I was exposed to the allergen, then the eruptions won't be very severe on the skin. But if my immunity is down, or if the dose of the allergen is very high, then I would expect to have a lot of rashes. So I would have very itchy skin because of this condition called acute dermatitis. So acute meaning it's sudden, and then dermatitis is the inflammation of the skin. And the way it would manifest is like my skin is very dry, very scaly, and very itchy. And I would tend to scratch it a lot, especially at night. And because at that time when I was a kid, I didn't really know how to take care of my skin very well. I would have a lot of sores all over my body, but I just learned how to really take care of my skin much better when I became maybe around 15 or 16 years old. So by the time I reached university, it wasn't so bad anymore. And the other forms of asthma, sometimes they're not triggered by food, sometimes they're triggered by exposure to certain chemicals, like to like certain house cleaning solutions. I also know of someone who is allergic to there's this thing called exercise induced asthma also. So if they exercise, because for some reason, when you breathe excessively while exercising, some people are sensitive to that type of change in the body, like when you have a high respiratory rate. So what it does is the excessive breathing causes some type of inflammation in the lungs also. So some people, when they exercise heavily, they tend to have an asthma attack also. So I'm very thankful that that's not my trigger, because my triggers, I can avoid them. It's difficult because these are nice food, like chocolate, dairy, and crustaceans, like shrimp, prawn, lobsters. They're very hard to avoid because they're delicious. But I'm just lucky that mine is more of like food, and if I can avoid them or take medication on time after being exposed to them, then I don't get an attack. If I do get one, it's very mild. Mild. When I say mild, that means I don't need to be hospitalized.
When you say you're hospitalized, just to clarify, it's because you suddenly have a hard time breathing. Is
Yeah,
that
I need
correct?
to I need to have some type of like breathing apparatus in my face. Like I would need oxygen. I would need to breathe through an oxygen mask so I have enough I get relieved from the symptoms, because when you have asthma, you can hear yourself breathe because you wheeze. Okay, then you cough a lot if you don't get enough air in your lungs, because your body tries to cope with the sensation that you're not getting enough oxygen, so it's like drowning in air. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So basically, your air pathways close up because of the inflammation, which are triggered by many different things. And so, from asthma, I also know that you went through a number of other health issues, which started your journey.
I People have to be more aware about this phase of life that all women have to go through, or will go through. And it's also the reason why I talk to anyone, any woman who I think would benefit from having this knowledge early enough. Because when I went through this experience, and I'm talking about perimenopause, when I went through this experience, it was like driving through like a dark road without any headlights on, because I really didn't know what was happening to my body. So the symptoms, I think I was going through it much earlier, but the symptoms that were disturbing for me started when I turned 40. So when I turned 40, I suddenly had this painful shoulder, and I couldn't move my shoulder very well. I thought I was having some type of DOMS, or because I like to exercise, so I thought I was having some type of delayed onset muscle soreness, which is like when your muscles get sore after a workout. But it didn't go away even though I had my massage. So I had to go through a physiotherapist and then a chiropractor, and then they put me on certain tests and they treated me, but it doesn't seem to help because it comes back from time to time. And then after that, I also had migraine, really like bad migraines for like 2 weeks. And then I went to the doctor, to a neurologist who had me get an MRI, and I spent a lot of money for that. And it turned out to be normal. And then I also had a bout where my eyes would just suddenly like tear up for no reason. I wasn't even crying, but tears would fall out from my eyes. So the doctor said I had dry eyes, but I didn't have any like type of problems with my eyes, like glaucoma or something. So I was negative for that. So after giving me like some moisturizers for the eyes, I was good. But that really disturbed me because it's like one disease after another. And then the worst one was when I had a bout of palpitations back in October 2023, which I really thought I was having a heart attack. And it happened while I was speaking to my sister-in-law. And I had to like lie on the floor because I feel like if I stood up or sit up, I'm just gonna faint. And I cannot afford to faint because I live alone. So what I did was I crawled out of my room, my house, and like knocked on the door of my neighbor to call an ambulance to pick me up and get me to the hospital, which they did. And when the paramedics came, they said they were actually checking my ECG while I was on the floor, like trying to survive. Like I feel like I was dying, and they said my ECG was normal. And then they had me admitted for observation. Everything, my entire ECG the whole time for like 2 days, 2 consecutive days are all normal. A cardiologist told me to put in a portable holster, which is like a portable ECG, strapped on my chest for like 7 days straight. Everything was normal, and I couldn't figure out why I was having such palpitations. So after that incident, right, I went to my regular checkup, my OB-GYN checkup. And the doctor said that because he wanted to check my egg reserves for some reason. And then I said, okay, sure, no problem. So I agreed to the test. And then that's when he told me I am perimenopause, because the egg supply that I had is supposed to be like zero point 0.1 at my age. But because it was 0.01, he said my egg reserves are very low. Yeah. So it's 1/10 of what I'm supposed to have at my age on average.
Right.
Okay. So when he saw the test results, right, he told me, my dear, I think you are actually in in perimenopause. So that's when I started my research. What is this perimenopause? So when I saw all the symptoms, right, of perimenopause, which is like 100 over plus symptoms, all my symptoms since I was 40 was all there. So the diagnosis when I was 40 is supposed to be frozen shoulder, which is one of the
Mm-hmm.
major symptoms of perimenopause. Dry eyes, which
Mm-hmm.
cause my eyes to tear up, which is one of the symptoms of menopause. Palpitations, which seems to feel like you're having a heart attack, is also one of the major symptoms of perimenopause. And then I also had hot flashes, sleepless nights. It's so difficult for me to fall asleep and to stay asleep. I had crying spells. I had some bouts of depression and anxiety also. So all these things added up. And I said, my goodness, I mean, the medical system does not even know how to diagnose women my age with perimenopause. And I also realized that the doctors, all doctors, I'm not sure about the doctors that are being trained now, but all the doctors that are practicing their specialty probably only had a half a day of lecture on menopause and perimenopause in their entire medical student life, which is such a
Yeah.
shame because perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause take up 30% of the rest of a woman's life. It's such a big chunk, and I don't understand why doctors are not educated properly on this and are not giving the right types of treatment and advice to women who are experiencing the symptoms already. It didn't even occur to them that I am seeing them as a 40 plus year old, mid 40s woman who may have the possibility of being in this stage of my life already, and nobody's teaching me about it. Nobody's telling
Mm.
me what to expect. Even my own mother, she didn't even tell me what her experience was like. It was only when I was going through it that I had to get back to her and ask her when did she actually hit her menopause. And that's when she told me that she hit menopause at 48, which is my age this year, So it's just
Mm.
right. And people have this notion that menopause is like in your 50s. No. Any woman 45 to 55 is the range where women can get menopause. And perimenopause hits you 5 to 10 years before you hit your menopause. And menopause is only one day. Okay? It is the anniversary of your last period. So in my case, my last period was on the 29th of March, 2025. I've not had a period since then. So I've been tracking the absence of my period. How long has it been? So 28th of March this year, 2026, marks my menopause date. And every day after that is postmenopausal already, you know? And I actually personally I want to celebrate because it just means that I am entering another phase of my life, and I have to celebrate it as a woman because when we were educated in high school, sex education talked about puberty, talked about pregnancy, but never menopause, never perimenopause. But how come we don't talk about these things? It takes up the rest of your life, in midlife. And there are even studies that sociologists are doing now, like they're trying to figure out if there is a connection when a woman enters menopause and perimenopause and divorce, because the incidence of divorce is highest when a woman goes through perimenopause and menopause. There might be a reason for that, because when women don't feel supported in that area of life, whenever they complain about certain health conditions, they cannot, how to say, be the same person with their partner, with their children, because they need a lot of help with their health, you know? So it's such a shame that we don't get enough care in the medical area.
As we wrap up part one of our conversation with Michelle, what really stands out is how her journey with health started much earlier, from dealing with asthma as a child to later facing the unexpected onset of perimenopausal symptoms. Michelle found herself navigating changes in her body without always having the information to fully understand what was happening. And that's what makes her story so powerful, because instead of staying in that uncertainty, Michelle chose to turn it into something meaningful. Tune in again next week as we learn more about Michelle's online endeavors to help other women who might be going through the same health issues.
This is Ching and Cho.
And Mary Ann Shoko.
See you guys next week.
Bye.